Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's a Monday afternoon, and I'm delighted to be joined by James Mackenzie. James, you have been sunning it up in far brighter climes than the freezing cold that I was faced with this morning at Celtic Park, although it gave it a right good atmosphere this morning. How's your holiday been? Glad to be back talking all things Celtic, James.
Yeah, it was good. Caught a 2-1 Derby win just before I jetted off, so the mood was already right for the flight heading over. I was over in Malta for about a week over the New Year. It was just good to get some nice weather, some warm weather, especially this time of year. I mean, we spoke about it on the podcast. This can be a tough time of year for many, so just getting an escape, time to relax, escape for the cold. It was great fun, but I'm back and I'm still got to wait another week for Celtic to play. I didn't get a game last week. I was wanting to jump right back into it, but Bucky
Yep.
Thistle this weekend, right back
Mhm.
into it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say you're going to have to wait another week for a signing. Well,
That
fortunately,
too.
that's not the case. Today, we are just awaiting the big announcement that Nicolas Kühn will be signing for Celtic. We know a bit about him, of course. There's a lot of chat around him being some kind of a project, but you don't sign a project at his age. I think that's mainly due to the fact that he was such a hot prospect when at Ajax and Bayern Munich that he still probably carries that tag as a bit of a protege, a bit of a wonder kid and all that, but he's not that age of a player, James. And we're talking, and Brendan Rodgers has been talking all season about improving his starting 11, and that's key, isn't it? I mean, he's coming in, and we can all have our look at the player and the show reels, etc. One of the most interesting things I've seen this morning is from X, and I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to give the guy full credit for it because it was a very good breakdown of the player. So check him out. It's John Walker. You can find John
The
at
same thread
John.
I've seen.
Is that the one you've seen? John Walker underscore 1986. Excellent breakdown of Kuhn. If you've not seen it, I'll run through some of the things that stuck out for me. 24 years of age, so same age as Mikey Johnson. James, you can no longer call him a wonder kid, right? He plays on the right wing. He's left-footed. And it's, I think, 3 million quid is the fee that we've been seeing all week. And the big question is, what does it mean for the rest of the wingers? And that's what we're going to start off by talking about. RB Leipzig. He started off as a youth player there, and he cost Ajax €2 million when 17 years of age. Went to Ajax, and again, still regarded as a kind of youth prospect at that point, but he was really highly rated in terms of Germany's next big thing. Again, check this out. John Walker is the man who's done all the research on it. I'm not going to try and nick all his hard work. And then he obviously moves to Bayern Munich on a free transfer, never broke through. And then he signs, after a short loan spell, he signs for about 500,000 euros for Rapid Vienna, and that's where he's played his senior football in the main. What I found interesting, James, when it was talking about his dribbling, it gives us a 61.7% success rate versus, for example, Palma, who is 48.8%. Crossing accuracy 38.1% against Palmer's 23.4%. Creating 29 big chances, Palmer creates or has created 57. And the weaknesses, physicality and passing. So I think he's one of the guys you look at, James, you think, right, a player who was full of potential, didn't quite make it at the level people expected him to. So he's taken a bit of a sidestep, if you like, maybe a backward step to make his name. But what I would say is, isn't that the type of player that Brendan Rodgers thrives on? Someone who's got it in there, but he just needs to get it pulled out. And potentially the man management aspect of Brendan can do that.
Yeah, I was going to go back to it's still sort of this same squad, but Ange Postecoglou touched it quite a lot when he was building the squad originally. He wanted players who had a point to prove. He brought in
Yeah.
someone like Joe Hart because he'd been written off for a number of years. He needed somewhere to call home again. Someone like Jota, who hadn't really worked out anywhere else, and he finally got his big break at Celtic, and he's finally started playing well, and he's realising that potential. I don't think he's going to do it over in Saudi Arabia, but he's looking closer to the player that they thought Jota was going to be when he first broke through as a youth player. And now Nicolas Kuhn is looking like the same sort of situation with Jota, where teams like Leipzig, Ajax, and Bayern Munich in his early days, but things just didn't really work out. He gets a move to Rapid Vienna, and things have started to go well for there. It's working at one team in green and white. Hopefully, it can work at another in Scotland. I'm not too sure how the quality transfers over from the Austrian league to the Scottish league. Will his numbers drop to somewhere around Blaise Palma's level when he comes to Scotland? Who knows? But he's shown some bright qualities. You mentioned his crossing as one of his strongest attributes, his pace as well. But what you said one of his weaknesses was his physicality. And usually you'd be thinking that could be a bit of a warning sign, because in a league like Scotland, or even down in England, the emphasis is on the physicality. It's you have to be strong to work. That's the usual cliche that comes along with it. But we've seen the last few years, guys like Kyogo have come in, guys like Maeda have come in, who aren't necessarily the strongest guys, and they've flourished in this league. So
Yeah.
I think his lack of physicality might not be as big a problem as many people will make it out to be. Where will he stand in the pecking order? I'm not so sure, because I've seen people posting predicted teams. This is what I think the strongest team is, and there's so many teams where I'm seeing guys like Palma and Abada both on the bench, and it's these guys are probably two of our best players. So you're thinking we've got what, Palma, Abada, Maeda, and Kuhn all as options. Then you've got guys like James Forrest, Yang, Mikey Johnson all waiting in the wings. That's too many players there. So you're thinking somebody's going to need to make way. Eventually, we'll have Yang come back. He's only 21, so there's plenty of room to improve. And as much as he's been pretty inconsistent, that's to be expected. At someone at that age, not everybody can come in and set the world alight. So I think you can stick through with Yang for a few more years, because I think there is a player in there somewhere. So where would Kuhn lie in the pecking order? Is he better than Palma? Is he better than Abada? Is he better than Maeda? I think if you're looking at the Celtic wing, Daizen Maeda has to start, just because of the pace and energy he offers the team. Brendan said on multiple occasions he offers the work at two players. So Maeda has to start. So you're looking at a bench of Palma and Abada if Kuhn comes into the team. If you stick with Palma, you're looking at Abada and Kuhn on the bench. It's a good depth of options to have there, considering one of the main criticisms we've had over the course of the season has been, when you look at the bench, there's no inspiration there. There's no one on the bench who can really come in and make the team better. There's no match winners on that bench. And now with one signing, you could have one or two match winners on the bench. So it's adding some good quality options, and I hope we see him play this weekend if he's back and ready. I think there's no better game for him to start off than against Bucky Thistle, because a player who of his quality has been playing in the Austrian Bundesliga, he should be coming in and dominating in a game like that. So if he can come in and get a goal straight away, even considering the opposition, it would still be a massive boost for him.
Yeah, it would. James, does it surprise you that our first signing is a winger? I mean, see, at the moment, and we're waiting for the big announcement from Celtic, which we expect to happen this afternoon. When he comes in effect, we have 9 wingers at this moment in time. Now, I know Rocco Vata, who we'll come back to, some might say he's not even a first-team player. Well, he's got first-team experience. He may well be on his way to Italy. But if he's included in the discussion, we now have 9. If you want to say, well, Vata's on his way out, we've still got 8. And I think that, the first point of discussion is, does it surprise you that the winger actually was on a priority list? And then secondly, I guess when I'm looking at that, I think, right, who do we need to move on? Because we can't run for the second half of the season with 8 on the wing. Now, we know that we've had horrendous injury problems this season, and we've seen how it affected us at the back, but also on the wings, and also in Hatate's position, where we had to try just about every player that we had in that position before we got a winner. The wingers at the moment, there's far too many of them. It's a bloated squad, as we've spoken about time and time again on Acsom. So firstly, were you surprised that was the first signing, James? Secondly, who do you ship out permanently or on loan?
Sorry, repeat it. Mine's just gone completely blank. Can you repeat that again?
I'll run through the players. So at the moment, I think of the wingers we have, Rocco's halfway out the door. He's gone to Italy. You've got 2 players, I think, who are for the future, in Tilio and Yang. Yang's had more game time, but I don't think he's shown enough that he's going to be playing 16 games in the second half of the season. So do you put them out on loan? I guess that's probably the first one. You've then got guys who have been at Celtic for a lengthy period of time. James Forrest, 15 seasons. Mikey Johnston, 8 seasons as a first-team player. Mad. What do you do with these guys? And then you move into the players who have been getting most game time. So you have Palma and Maeda, you've got the new arrival in Kühn, and you've got, Palma and Maeda, and you've got Abada, who's barely played due to injury. So what do you do with them all? Because there's no way we can be keeping them. And I think there's probably room, if you include Vata in this, for 3 of those players, maybe 4, to move on. What do you do with them all?
Well, I think Rocco Vata is going to leave on a free transfer. I mean, if he was going to stay at Celtic, would have signed a new contract by now. The fact that things have been dragging out so much suggests that he is on his way out. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over to Serie A. I think it's Torino that's interested in him over there. I know there's a couple of good young Irish prospects coming through. There's a young Irish player, I think it's Juventus, who's around the same age as Rocco Vata, so he could be in Rocco's ear saying this could be a decent move. I've come over here and I'm developing quite well, so I wouldn't be surprised if Vata does go over to Italy. With people like Marco Tilio and Yang, I don't think we can really do anything with them in this window because they're preoccupied already. They have got the Asian Cup to contend with. Depending on what stage the competition their team gets put out, I think they'll be over there. I think Australia and Korea are probably 2 of the better teams in the competition, so they'll probably be there for a long time. So I don't think we can do anything with them. But when it comes to the summer, one thing I've been liking from this January window is we've been sending players out on loan to Scottish teams. Kwon has been sent out on loan to St Mirren. Was it Adam Montgomery might be going out on loan to Motherwell? So there's a couple of players there that would send out on loan to Scottish teams. I'd like us to do the same with Marco Tilio. I'd like to see, he needs game time, realistically. He needs game time. Same with Yang. And as you mentioned, we've got far too many wingers. Like Mikey Johnson, I've said on the podcast multiple times, I think the English Championship will probably be his level. I mean, he's performing too good for the Republic of Ireland national team. He's impressing whenever he plays. I've seen, if I'm scrolling on Twitter and Republic of Ireland are playing, I'll see neutrals who aren't Celtic fans commenting, this Mikey Johnson guy looks quite good. Where's he been? So we've been wondering the same thing for a good few years. But I think he'll be off in the summer, most likely. So that leaves us with Abada, Palma, Maeda and Kuhn, who you think, unless something happens with Abada, there's been some reports that aren't reports in the media coming out. He is in a tough situation, so I wouldn't be surprised if Abada maybe moved on in the summer. You'd imagine there would be pressure from back home for him to move on. So I wouldn't be surprised if he moved on. But if you can keep those 4 players, that is some great quality to have in the wings. Each player there you could see being a difference maker. I might be jumping the gun a bit on Kuhn, but with the 3 players that we know 100% about, you know that they can be game changers. So if you can keep them around, then you're well set up in the wide areas for the next season.
Yeah, you absolutely are. And I think the way I would play it, James, is, and we'll have a wee look at the Asian Cup. We've got quite a few players out at the moment playing in the tournament, is I do see Tilio and Yang as players for the future, and I would be loaning them out. I'll come back to your point about loaning out to Scottish teams because I think that's a great move. When it comes to Johnson and Forrest, I would cut Johnson free. I think it's time for him to move on. If you can get a fee for him, brilliant. I don't think it would be a fortune, but I think you move him on. James Forrest is going to be kicking around until he retires. I think I said that before. He's going to be utilised by Brendan Rodgers, not regularly, but he's there, and I think he's an important part. And by the way, this isn't me saying, "Oh, he's good in the dressing room," because you've got the famous sketch stroke meme for Roy Keane going on about being good in the dressing room. It's not about being good in terms of your character and your personality. It's more about the leadership and the experience. And particularly when there's such an influx of new players coming from all over the globe, really, at Celtic Park, you need, I think, a nucleus, a core group of players who understand what this football club is, what it means, and what levels of success have to be attained, not just year on year, but day on day, 24/7, you're a Celtic player. I think James Forrest is important from that perspective. And then you go in, as you say, to the top four, which is Palma, Maeda, Abada, and our new arrival. I'm going to say, in relation to Abada, we're going to lose him. We're going to lose Abada. And it comes down to the fact that he is going to continually get pressured from elsewhere, be that his national team boss, other international teammates, the press in Israel, family members even. He's going to continually get pressurised into leaving Celtic whilst the situation continues. And it will continue because, James, it's been omnipresent in my lifetime, and I'm 45. That situation is not going to disappear. It's, where are high-ranking politicians, where are they coming out asking for a ceasefire? It's not happening, and it's not going to happen because of the world in which we live. So this situation is not going to improve for Abada. So if you want to take out that any kind of thought process politically for a second and say, is the player happy? Well, the answer is no. And if a player is unhappy, then he can't be at the club. He really can't, because he'll never be able to focus on being the best version of himself as a football player, James. And I think I was really excited when Brendan Rodgers took over at Celtic because, going back to what we said about our new arrival, Kühn, the fact that, he loves not a lost cause as such, but someone who has something to prove. And you quite rightly mentioned a couple of examples that Ange worked alongside. And I think you could probably throw Carter Vickers into that mix as well. Someone who kind of failed at his parent club to make it. And he was getting, loaned out. What were we? His 8th loan club, something like that?
It was just every single season. There's sometimes a loan would get cut short in the December and they'd go back out in the January. So that's 2 loans, 2 different environments. It's how does a player get settled? Because that's a big part of football. It's being able to call a place home, having some familiar surroundings when you're getting transported to different clubs, some abroad, some not. Every single season, it's especially for players that young, it can throw them off. And I want to touch on Abada. I've got to remember he's 22, 23. He's got a lot of pressure coming from back home, calling him a national disgrace. You're shaming your nation by staying at this club. But he knows, I've enjoyed it in Glasgow for my last few years. I'm making some decent money. I've had some great moments, scored some great goals, playing European football. The amount of pressure that's going to be on his shoulders, and he's only, 2-3 years older than me. It's crazy the amount of pressure that's on his shoulders. So I wouldn't be surprised if a move to the Premier League happens. I know he's had troubles with injuries, but we can't forget how good a player he actually is. There was Premier League interest at a point. I think Crystal Palace were linked for a good few weeks, and if they don't get relegated this season, I could see them coming back in for Abada in the summer.
Yeah, and listen, I'd be gutted because I do think there's so much more to see from this player, and I was excited when Brendan came in for that very fact. I thought he could tap into it. It's not happened due to injury, and now we find ourselves in this scenario. So it will be a big loss for Celtic, I think, and I'd love to be proven wrong on this, but certainly by next season, I don't think Abada will be a Celtic player, and that's really unfortunate. We have started bringing bodies in the door, which is great, but almost as important at the moment to make things happen, we're moving people on. And I want to break this one down as well, because you mentioned earlier about loaning to Scottish teams. And on a Celtic State of Mind, we've said it time and time again. I know it's not always going to be the case for a number of reasons. You might get a scenario where you just can't find a fit. I don't think wages are an issue at a club like Celtic with regards to whoever is loaning the player, because there is a rule that the loaning club has to pay something, but there has been occasions in the past where that has been £1 towards the wage of the player just to get the deal done. So I don't think that will be an issue as such. And we also have the arrangement with Admira Wacker. I like having kind of nursery clubs where if you're able to put over a batch of players in one go, I think what's also important is you need to have someone over there liaising, engaging, looking after them. And we did that before when Willie McStay went over to Hungary, but he only got one player from us. He was expecting a lot more than that. Ujpest Dosha he went to. So I can see that working. But largely, if there's an opportunity to get your players in at a Scottish club, I think there's so many more benefits, because you know, there are pros and cons. All these young guys, James, that are going over to Italy from Scotland, right? Part of the fact that they're so good and so sought after is due to them playing in Italy, right? So the Aaron Hickey that Brentford bought wasn't the Aaron Hickey that left Hearts, right? So the development of that player, be it going over to Italy, is absolutely key. It's the same with Doig, Ferguson. These guys have had to make the move to develop into the player. So I get that, moving somewhere else into another environment can benefit players. But I think the examples of Liam Scales, Ryan Christie, and Chris Ayer going to a fellow Premiership club whereby you get plenty of games under your belt, the tempo, the culture of the game, but also you can damage our opponents. And I think that's key, and obviously Kwon has gone to St Mirren. So they're delighted because they've got a £1 million player. James, will we ever see him coming back and wearing a Celtic strip? I'm not too sure. But the second one, as you quite rightly said, Adam Montgomery. So he went to Fleetwood under Bruni. But since he went down there, he's actually played under 3 different managers. Scott Brown, Lee Johnson, Charlie Adam. So I think that there was an unsettling period there for Montgomery. But when we recalled him, I wasn't sure if it was because we weren't able to move on Bernabei and we needed cover in that area. But it seems as though we've recalled him so we can put him out to either Dundee, St Johnstone or Motherwell. But I think the benefits far outweigh anything in relation to a negative when it comes to a player being loaned out to a Scottish club.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea because they're going to be improving in our league, hopefully, fingers crossed. I read something, I think it was a quote from Stephen Robinson when they signed Kwon on loan. It was that Brendan Rodgers specifically wanted him to go to St Mirren. I don't know if it was if he specifically wanted Kwon to go to St Mirren or wanted Kwon to go out on loan in the Scottish League. I think I'd said on the blog a while ago, he wasn't getting picked in any Celtic squads for domestic games. So is he good enough for Scottish football? I mean, we don't know because we've never seen him play a minute in the Scottish Premiership. And I think we're finally going to see that. St Mirren have got one loan because their probably star man, Keanu Bacchus, is out with Australia at the Asian Cup. So Kwon is going to play. We are going to get to see him, finally, just not in the green and white hoops of Celtic. And I'll be keeping a close eye on him because it'll be a good loan move from him, hopefully. We've seen in the past guys like Ryan Christie, as you mentioned, guys like Christopher Ayer who've gone out on loan. And sometimes it's not even about the surroundings. It's just getting the minutes in your legs because I can't name a single football player who has improved by sitting on the bench and doing nothing. I'm sure you'd probably struggle to do the same. So it's just about getting them out and getting them the minutes because they're not going to improve sitting on the bench doing nothing.
No, you're absolutely right. And then a decision can be made on the player. Now, I know that, as I say, that there are pros and cons to it. You can send a player elsewhere, like our captain, Callum McGregor, and he benefited massively from his loan move to Notts County. It looked as though Mikey Johnston had breathed new life into his Celtic career by spending a year or a season rather in Portugal. It's not quite worked out, and we're not sure what the future holds for him. Let us know in the comment section what you think about all the discussion points. Leo Abada, does he have a future at Celtic? Nicolas Kühn, who does he replace? Where is he in the pecking order? And also
back in on that, on just the top of the loanees, even if the loan doesn't work out wherever the player goes, I'd still rather that than them sitting on the Celtic bench doing nothing, because at least you've seen, right, they've gone out and played and they've not done well. They've not done well there. Chances are that means they're not good enough for Celtic. At least you're getting some sort of assessment on how good the player actually is, more so than if they were sitting here doing nothing. So I'd rather even a failed loan spell than them just rotting in the reserves doing absolutely nothing.
No, you're right. I agree. Players have got to play. This is the big thing, James. I mean, in terms of a player at 24, 25, I mean, the classic example that I gave earlier in the season was Nat Phillips, when he came to Celtic. And at the age of 26, he had played as much games or as much minutes in the senior game as Callum McGregor had played in the season that Callum was 26. So in one season, Callum had played as much football as Nat Phillips had in his entire career. And I just think when you're 24, 25, if you're not playing, then you can stagnate. And like Kwon, he needs to adapt. He absolutely needs to adapt. He's come from the second division in South Korea, and he's come in. He played a couple of minutes in pre-season in friendly games, but you really need to see them in competitive action. So hopefully we can see that from Kwon, and then a judgment can be made. Now, there's been a few comments coming in, and I'm really appreciating everybody who is commenting on the show. I don't normally mention anybody passing away on the show unless it's been 100% confirmed by the club, and I don't know if it has been. Therefore, we won't be talking about that until I can confirm in relation to a couple of the comments that are coming through. Now, John Sweeney, we really need another 3 in, especially a number 2 keeper, as I have no confidence in Bain if Hart gets injured in this title running. And just look what happened to Hart. Lucky it wasn't serious. We're talking, of course, against St Mirren, where he was kicked in the head. And you're right. It's just a moment like that. I remember against Dundee United last season where he looked as though he had pulled up, and you thought to yourself, oh no, we do not have the quality in reserve in that position. So I absolutely understand where John's coming from. But at the moment, James, I really do think, because of the nature of our bloated squad, I don't think that we're going to be bringing in a goalie until Siegrist is away, a left back until Bernaby's away. And seriously, I pitched that this morning on the socials, and people were saying, but we're Celtic, we can buy players in. Yeah, we can, but it's actually affecting you negatively elsewhere, because you've got another 2. If you bring in say you bring in a goalie and a left back, you've then got an even unhappier Bernaby and Siegrist in the wings. That's not good for morale. It's not good for the mood in the camp. And I think, Brendan Rodgers particularly is going to be very, very careful as to the moves that we make in this window. I'm not expecting a goalie, James. I really don't expect a goalie to come in.
Yeah, there's 3 of them at the club already. And I've mentioned on the podcast on the number of occasions, I think we need a starting goalkeeper. I think we do need one, but I've always mentioned that with the caveat of we're not going to do it in January, because that's at the halfway point of the season and things are still tight in the league. There would be a massive risk. It would probably be more at the team's detriment to bring in a new goalkeeper to start over Joe Hart than it would be to just wait till the summer. I think Joe Hart's contract is up in the summer. He can get a big send-off if he doesn't renew and he eventually moves. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is Joe Hart's last season. I mean, I'm not too sure how old he is now. I know he is getting on a bit, but
36.
36. If you are going to get a new goalkeeper, I think it would be in the summer. I've seen talks of Kelleher from Liverpool, which have excited me. I think I was writing on the blog in the summer about how I wanted Celtic to sign him. He's the dream keeper that I wanted back then.
Right. So
like
expand on that, James. Tell us a wee bit more then, because I've seen his name linked pretty strongly actually in the last week. Another goalkeeper who, going back to the guys that don't play much football, he's not played much senior football, but he is a full international cap. His brother started off at Celtic, centre half, I think he played. Never broke through, but he is a name that keeps coming back every time somebody talks about a goalie, James. So for anyone in the comment section who's not familiar with Kelleher, tell us a wee bit about him.
I mean, he's been at Liverpool for a good while now, but he's always played the role of backup. He'll step in. He's in the unfortunate situation where he is the backup to the best goalkeeper on the planet, which it's going to be a tough task to try and break into that team anyway. So if there's question marks around, why isn't he playing? Why has he not played this many games? It's because Alisson is Liverpool's starting goalkeeper and he's the best goalkeeper on the planet. But when Kelleher does step in, when he's called upon, it's always when Alisson's injured or for a cup game or even a team in a match in Europe where it's against a lesser opposition where they would be expected to blow them away anyway. So Kelleher, he steps in for these games, and I've always thought he's done a good job whenever I've seen him play these games, even when he's called up for English Cup matches against some of the better teams in England, such as a Chelsea or a Manchester City or something like that. He usually always comes in and gives a good account of himself. And in a team where it's going to be so hard to get minutes, I'm surprised he hasn't moved on yet. But even when he was getting linked to moves away, Liverpool were wanting around 15 to 20 million for him, because that shows how highly they rate him at the club. They rate him as a is a decent player who would probably be getting more game time if it wasn't Alisson's backup. So I'd like, if you can get him for a cheaper fee, I'd like us to go for him in the summer. We're not going to pay about £10 million, but I'd say around £5, maybe even £6 million at his age. I think he's about 26, Kelleher, 25, 26. So if you can bring him in for a goalkeeper, that's basically 22 if you're a winger, 22, 23 for playing any other position. So if we can get him in, he could be a top goalkeeper for years. And then there's a sell-on value there as well because he's already been in the Premier League. So they'll be a bit more familiar with him. So you could even try and upcharge the Premier League teams as well for Kelleher. So I'd like us to go for him in the summer. We were touching on left backs as well. I don't think we'll get a left back in January. I never really thought we did, but I think Anthony Joseph or Stephen McGowan, it was one of the two, has reported that I think it's a left back and a striker are the other places on Celtic's radar. Those have been the players that we've been linked with. We've been linked with Araujo as a left back, we've been linked with an endless amount of strikers. I mean, it's basically a lottery. They're basically picking names out of a hat at this point with regards to strikers, and I don't think we're going to go for a striker. I mean, we've got lucky that Kyogo's still here. We were linked with strikers anyway because we thought both Kyogo and O were going to be gone. And we're lucky that last season's player of the season, as he swept the awards last season, he's still here. So I don't think there's a need for another striker there. Again, you'd be plugging a gap for a month. In the summer, perhaps a different story. But with left back, I think it's a case of you're waiting for Bernabei to go. Because Celtic, whenever these reports have come out saying that Celtic want a left back, it's always been to provide competition. So I think you need Bernabei to go before you can add that competition in, because then you've got too many left backs there and an already bloated squad. So I think you wait for Bernabei to leave. I've not seen any rumours heating up. There was initial reports that there was interest from back in Argentina and from Italy, but there's been nothing coming as a result of that. So I don't know if Bernabei is going to even leave in January. I think he might be a summer sale.
Well, these are the things, again, James, in terms of squad management that we've spoken about time and time again in Acsom. I do think that it's a priority that we bring in a left back. And if there's other players who are becoming kind of blocks in that progress, it's frustrating as anything to watch from a Celtic perspective. I'm really keen to know your thoughts. Bring them in the comments section. Where else do we need to strengthen? What is your priorities? Are you like James? You don't think we're going to bring in a left back or a striker? Where else should we absolutely be focusing on to strengthen? Double Denim, great to see you as always. Afternoon, Acsom. Will be good to see Kühn in the door and hopefully a few more to follow. With Montgomery heading back out on loan, does that mean a new left back is imminent? And are the Kelleher links legit? Well, James has given you a wee breakdown on Kelleher of Liverpool. He's a Republic of Ireland international, and he has played 32 senior games for Liverpool. So you do get concerned when you see the lack of game time, but you've given a good indication as to why that is the case. James, 10 caps for Ireland, 25 years of age. He would come with a big, massive transfer fee, but as you said, an opportunity to sell him on, if indeed you wanted to do that. Why not just keep him for 10 years? There's one thing I want to touch on again, and it's on the Vata scenario, not that player specifically, but every time I bring it up or mention it on the socials, there is always, I would say, is it a majority? Yeah, I would say there's a majority of people saying he can't be good enough, right? So that's why he's going. He's not good enough. And I don't think it's as simple as that when it comes to academy players, James, right? So when you look at the number of players that has left, everybody remembers the names Doak and Dembele, but there's been loads. I mean, we've lost players over the last 5, 6, 7 years and beyond who have not gone on to play for Celtic's first team, largely. And I think that the frustration for me is just to say, well, they're not good enough, doesn't really ring true, because Liverpool or Blackburn Rovers or Bayern Munich think that they're good enough at that level, and they feel as though they can give them a pathway into first team football. And it'll probably be another 5 years before we can truly review all the names that have left in the last few years and say which ones, would have been good Celtic players. But my big argument that always comes against that, they're not good enough. Brendan sees them in training every single day. Absolutely. And he's a better judge of footballer than I'll ever be. But if you look at the academy as a whole, James, right? And this is maybe something you want to do for the blog, so get checking the stats. How many players of Celtic actually produced in the last 20 years who have played 100 games for the club? Not many.
Yeah,
In the last 20 years, not many.
McGregor, Forrest, then who else?
I know.
Where would they go from there? It's
not many is
even
the off the
when you
top
look
of my
at
head answer.
if Brendan Rodgers is talking to the
handful.
academy players, if he's talking to the academy players and he needs to give an example of the pathway that is available to the academy players in the last 10 years, who are the examples of players going to be that he's pointing at? Because I'd say McGregor and Forrest, those two breaking into the team, that's a bit too far back now. You're going back about over a decade for James Forrest, and you're going back about 9-10 years for Cal McGregor. So the examples that Brendan Rodgers,
Tierney and Ralston are
Tierney, Ralston, and Stephen Welsh are probably the only examples you can point at. One of them only got his chance because of an injury, and then the other two only really got their chance because the club was in the worst state it was in about 2 decades. So Brendan Rodgers, he'd be really scraping the barrel with examples to give these young players of there's a pathway. You can make it at Celtic. The pathway is out the exit door to another club in Europe who will take the chance on them. You're seeing Ben Doak, he's gone over at Liverpool, he's done all right. Unfortunately, picked up a really bad injury, which one of the best aspects of Ben Doak's game was his pace. He was absolutely rapid. So I think it might have been an ACL injury he had. So at that young age, when the best aspect of your game is your pace, I hope it doesn't hamper him too much. I hope we can see him crack on. But it's been a problem for about 2-3 years now at an alarming rate. We're seeing players leaving the club for pastures new from the youth academy. And there's nothing better than watching someone coming from through the academy and making it at Celtic. We know how much of a fan favourite Kieran Tierney was. Callum McGregor's a fan favourite, the current club captain. So it's something you want to see. There has to be opportunities where they can be given out. I know in a title race, every game is must win and this sort, but we're playing on Sunday, I think, against Bucky Thistle. You can give somebody a chance then. Surely there has to be opportunities where if Man City can chop and change their team, and I think they played 3 or 4 academy players in a Champions League group stage game this season. If they can afford to do that, how can Celtic not afford to give some players in the academy a chance in the Premiership? I just don't really get it.
We spoke about it on Friday, Alan Morrison and Jim Orr, and Jim was saying, well, we've got to win every game. You're not going to throw in a youngster. Totally get it. But I think the reason we're at that stage is because we've not had a cycle. You need a cycle. It's a bit like the transfers, right? We're now in a situation where we have an issue with transfers due to the fact, not just because of the summer, but going right back to the last 3 transfer windows. So the players that we bought 3 transfer windows ago, James, they should have been absolutely implemented into the Celtic side. They should have been coming up to their best. The ones that came before that, like Matt O'Reilly, etc., they've already got to that point where they're now excelling. There's interest from elsewhere. They're international footballers. And then the cycle stops. And it's almost as if you need to start the cycle again, so that every 6 months you've got a player who's coming in, but there's always somebody ahead of them, and that's fine. At the moment, the cycle has absolutely fallen by the wayside, and I think it's the same with the academy players. We should have had, a conveyor belt of players coming through, and we've not had it. We've absolutely not had it. And the reason I bring it up, I'm not saying, as I'm sitting here right now, take 3 players for that B team and put them in the first team, because clearly they're not good enough. But there's a whole host of reasons why they're not good enough, and one of them is something Celtic can do nothing about, and that is that the gap's too big between the Lowland League and the first team. That's one of the biggest issues that Celtic face at the moment. So what can we do? And I think that, not only bringing in fringe players and putting them out on loan to Scottish clubs, I think we need to do more of that with the young players and have more of the nursery type clubs dotted around Europe where we can actually put them out there for first team experience, bring them back in the door, graduate X amount of players every single year into the first team, because otherwise the academy's not working. And that's my big concern, because obviously there's a financial investment, but there's also the historical links that Celtic have to rearing our own youth players, James. All the greatest sides, you look at them, there's a core Celtic players who have come through the ranks. And it's something that we need to do, because when you're a club like Celtic in the food chain that we're in, and where we are with regards to income streams, you've got to look at every margin. And one of the margins that we're not looking at and absolutely maximising is 1 or 2 young guys coming through every couple of years from our own academy, who are already indoctrinated into the successful way of a team like Celtic and the mentality and the culture of the club. We're not doing that well enough. And that's something that we need to improve on.
Even if you look at, I'm just going to make the point, if you look at the Scottish national team is in the best position it's been in about, 20, 25 years? How many players from Celtic that have come through Celtic's academy, probably the biggest academy in Scotland, how many players in that team have actually come through the Celtic academy? You've got Aaron Hickey, who left us as a boy. You've got Cal McGregor, and that's it. The Scottish team is the best it's been in years, and we're barely contributing to it. Where's this good crop of players coming through our academy? It's a real head scratcher.
It is, but there's a knock-on effect, isn't there? So if you go 5 years without bringing a player through the academy and putting him in your first team and him becoming a regular player, if you go 5 years without doing that, you then have a knock-on effect, because for 5 years, the parents of all the best talent in Scotland will be saying, don't go to Celtic, you don't get a game. So there's a whole knock-on effect. The cycle has fallen by the wayside. It needs to get back on track. Sorry for the vehicular comments there with the analogies, but that is where we are with Celtic's youth system. It's not working, and it needs a complete overhaul. Whether or not we see it, I don't know. We seem to just like to try and buy ourselves out of trouble. You've mentioned Bucky Thistle a few times, and I'm really keen for everybody's thoughts on this. It's a game that when I saw it, I thought to myself, 60,000 seater stadium, Bucky Thistle getting 5,000. It's one of the games, James, that you've got to be creative as a football club to get a decent crowd in there, right? Because there's plenty, because it goes on public sale. Season ticket holders have had their opportunity to buy their tickets. It's now gone on general sale. I've seen the tweet this morning from Celtic. But it's one of the ones where you're thinking the crowd might be between 25 and 30,000. And for many, many different reasons. You want it to be mobbed. You want it to be sold out.
I think it'd be a bigger crowd just based on the first Celtic home game since, the 30th of December?
30th of December.
That would be the incentive for people to go along.
Is it a big enough incentive? Let me know in your comments what you think about it. Because I think if you go to that game and there's 25, 30,000, then Celtic should have done more to promote it, is my point. This is my point. I remember talking to, all I've seen is a couple of emails that we've got promoting the, obviously, season tickets to buy the tickets, and then a few tweets. And there's things we can do as a football club, James. There's opportunities. It does. I remember listening to the Anfield Wrap, and what happened is Liverpool had employed, this was years ago, they'd employed someone who worked within ticketing, and it was all about, his mantra was that there should never be an empty seat in Anfield. No matter what, you make sure there's somebody on that seat. And obviously for the big games, they sell themselves, you get that, right? But for these games, they're going to be a harder sale for all the reasons you would expect. The fact that it's over and above the season ticket means that 54,000 people would then have to buy an additional ticket to go to the game, where normally it's on the season book. It's also the time of the year, in an already struggling climate. We've just had Christmas and New Year. You've got all these things to consider. And I remember talking to a football club in Scotland who they shut a stand in their stadium rather than try to get people in it. They just shut the stand. Nobody comes, we'll shut it. And that means we don't have to get people to work there in the pie stalls and at the turnstiles or whatever. They just shut it. So there was no creative thinking. And I just think that on occasions like this, we have an opportunity as a football club. And I think most clubs should do it. Community clubs should do it as well, where you think, right, let's get bums on seats and let's make sure that people within the community who can't afford to come to a Celtic game, who would like to come to a Celtic game, be that underprivileged kids, minorities within the community, those who are unemployed at this moment in time, get them in the stadium. It would involve, James, people to obviously organise it. You would need people to organise that. But we've got enough staff at Celtic to be able to do that and to be able to engage and liaise with all these different groups all around Glasgow and the surrounding areas. get them in. Get them in. And get them in, even if it means you're giving them tickets so that they can be in the ground. Get them in the stadium. I would much rather that than a half-empty Celtic Park, James. We need to be creative with these things.
Yeah, the Kano Foundation have done some great work this season. You've seen the Kano kids up in the front row and absolutely enjoying themselves on Champions League nights. There should be more incentives to get people to come along to these games. The incentive, as I mentioned earlier, would be that it's the first Celtic game since the derby at Celtic Park. So you want to come and rally the team on. But then again, Celtic, do you really want to see Celtic playing against a Highland League team? I'm not too sure if that will inspire a lot of people to come along. You see, the bigger attendances are when the bigger teams come to town. That's just how things are. But I hope we can get a decent turnout for the game. Maybe, I don't know about the 30,000 you're suggesting. I think it'll be a bit more than it would be for like a friendly, about 40,000 perhaps.
Great. I'll tell you, if there's 40,000 in the stadium, I would be delighted with that. I think that would be a win-win for Celtic. Now, when we're talking about other priorities, let's get the thoughts of the viewers in. Kevin Mullen, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you. You're watching on YouTube. Anyone who is watching and hasn't subscribed yet, get subscribing, and it allows you to comment on the live shows. And you also get, obviously, all the other content that we put on the channel, such as the Johan Mjällby live event, which was recorded in its entirety, and it was uploaded last night. Me on a stage with the big man, Johan, speaking for an hour. Get on it. It's gone down pretty well. We had a lot of people asking when we started advertising the live events, a lot of people asking about tuning in. If you don't live in the area, for example, you can't get a ticket. A lot of people watch Acsom from all over the globe. We've got viewers all over the place. I love hearing where you're watching it from. And people were saying, why don't you just fire it on the channel? Well, there's a few things that stop us from doing it. The first one is you need permission from the player, of course, to do that. And also the player on a live setting will give you a different interview than one that is being filmed. And you want the live audience to enjoy the freedom that the live event gives them. So yeah, we were able to put this one out. Go and enjoy it. It's 1 hour with Johan Mjällby. Some brilliant insights into his time as a player and also as part of Neil Lennon's coaching team as well. Kevin Mullen, afternoon Acsom. Good start of the window, getting new winger. Now a left back and a striker. I agree with you, Kevin. We will be fine for the league and cup double. Right. I'm going to bring in some more of your views before we go on to the next subject, which is just how big winning the league is this season to Celtic and the complacency that I spoke about on Friday, not allowing that to creep in. Joe Hamilton, hail from a very cold but sunny Austria. Here we go. You'll have seen our new signing. You're telling us that Kühn is fast, strong, and he will be a great addition to our team. It's great to know someone who's actually watched them firsthand and can give us a bit of an insight as well, James. We've got Treble coming in on the YouTube. Afternoon all. Kühn looks like a talent, is in the mould of an old favourite, Paddy Roberts. Are we allowed to mention Paddy Roberts, James, during a transfer window? Is that not banned?
I'd say you can name him. I think he's not far out the Celtic picture now. You can probably name him.
How many clubs has he had since he left Celtic?
Well, imagine we'd got him on a permanent deal.
Yeah.
How different could things have been?
I know.
I'd love to do. That's something I'm probably need to do in the blog. Just come up with that idea. That Celtic what ifs. A bit like what Marvel did on Disney Plus. It was, what if this never happened? What if this injury never happened? This sort of thing.
Well, I can't believe, and we're going to get absolute pelters for speaking about Patrick Roberts during a transfer window. This isn't because we think we should go out and sign him, right? But I'm interested to see how his career's gone. 26 years of age now, Patrick Roberts. I loved him. I thought he was phenomenal. Could play on both wings. Obviously, he's known to Brendan Rodgers. I am not pitching him to come to Celtic. But let's have a wee look. Since he returned to Celtic off that second loan deal in 2018, he has gone to Girona, who I think are part of the City Group, are they not, James? So he went to Girona.
The second in the Spanish league now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so he went there on loan from Man City. Man City is still his parent club. He then went to Norwich. He then went to Middlesbrough. He went back to Middlesbrough. And eventually, he went to Derby. And then he went to, is it Troyes in France?
I think so.
And then eventually he leaves Man City in 2022. So they were all loan deals. And he is now at Sunderland. Who's their gaffer? Can't think. So Patrick Robert, no, we don't want him to sign. But yeah, interesting that you can see similarities there. Treble. Can only see a couple of loans coming in now until the end of January. Right, you brought it up. James, see at this moment in time, and I'm going to ask those watching, the 1,000 watching, give us more what-if scenarios, because my big what-if scenario is if Benkovic and Simunovic could have stayed fit. You know, what if that was your partnership at the back? That would be awesome.
The biggest one for me would be if Brendan Rodgers doesn't leave for Leicester in 2019, do Celtic win 10 in a row? That's the biggest what if that there is.
You're blaming Brendan for that now? That's some twist.
I think I've always held the view that he had it on a silver platter for us, and we messed it up somehow. There's a multitude of different reasons. We'd be here for a 3-hour show if we were to go over them all. But that's probably my biggest what if.
Yeah, there's a lot of big what ifs, and I love that. I love it. I really do. Let us know your big what if moments in Celtic's history in the comment section. We've got David Boyle coming in. Great to see you, David. I thought Montgomery coming back was the chance. So did I when I first seen it. I thought to myself, right, you're cutting that short because we're going to be running with Montgomery. Of course, we've got Mitchell Frayne, who played against Feyenoord as well. He's
seen since
in the discussion, not been seen since. But
he
like
came on and done well as well. I thought
you did.
Because Greg, around that sort of time, Greg Taylor wasn't in great form either. So there was a couple of calls from the start, the following game, from supporters, and he wasn't in the squad, and he hasn't been seen since.
He wasn't in the squad. It was a bit like Lagerbielke, who did, of course, come back in for the St Mirren game, got some minutes on the park. But news of his departure has gone a bit quiet, actually, Lagerbielke. David Boyle, however, he says, as it develops, we need a left-back and striker ASAP. I agree. And a keeper would be nice. I think the fact that we've got 3, we won't run with 4, might hold us back, David, until the summer. And James doesn't like the idea of bringing in a goalie during the season anyway, do you, James?
Nah, I think goalkeeper's such an important position that you need the player to be settled. So I think messing up the groove, especially the sort of links he has with the Celtic backline, it's too big a risk to take. So I think you're better to stick it out with Joe Hart until the summer. I mean, the big call surrounding Joe Hart, the question is, one, is he good enough for Scottish football? The question is, what, is he good enough for European football? And we don't have any of that until hopefully next September. There's September coming up. But I think you stick it through Joe Hart till the summer, and then you'll have more goalkeepers available at that point. You'll have more options in the summer as well. You're more likely to get a high quality player because they're not going to leave a club in January. So I think you wait till the summer.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that, the difficulties of the January transfer window, we need to recognise that there are difficulties. It was mentioned earlier on there about loan signings. And I think that under the correct circumstances, the loan signing is absolutely fine. So if you think about the striker scenario, I know that you're not 100% sold on bringing a striker in, James. A lot of the commenters are mentioning a striker. I think we should bring one in. And you look at the guys that we have been linked with, and I use the word linked very loosely because there could be no link. I mean, Van Hooijdonk is constantly linked to Celtic. So we asked his old man if it was a goer, and he said, no, Celtic haven't been in touch about Sidney Van Hooijdonk. That was then. This is now. And I realise that was 7 or 8 weeks ago. But it just shows you that anybody can be linked to a club, and that's through somebody in the media wanting clicks on their site. It could be an agent that's just trying to tout their players out. It links them to 2 or 3 clubs, so we get it all. But the names that we've seen so far: Lawrence Shankland, Miofsky, Van Hooijdonk, and Kvitsgarden. There's 4 strikers that have been linked to Celtic. So if you look at Kvitsgarden, I know you've written quite a bit about him on the blog, James, right? The figure was, I think, Bromby wanted 4 million in the summer. Celtic were willing to pay 3.5, something around those figures. Those figures haven't quite doubled, but they're right up at like 7.5 million now, right? So if you say to a club like Bromby, we're going to take him on with an option to buy, they'll ask for a sizable loan fee, and then the option to buy means that your permanent fee comes down. So the negotiation could be quite intricate if you like, on a deal like that, I would be far more. Listen, £7.5 million is still a lot of money for Celtic. I get it, right? But with a player in his age category, I just sometimes think we're overcautious. So although I'm not against loan transfers, they've worked really, really well for us. The Bernardo one might work for us. Jota worked for us. CCV, Awata, Maeda. These deals have all worked for us. I just think that we're in that situation sometimes where we're a bit overcautious. If you've got somebody in their early 20s and they're valued at £7 million, bring them in. What, are we scared again in case we get our fingers burned? Is there now a point where we just won't push the boat out Eduard style like we did first time round under Rodgers?
Well, the thing with Chris Gardner is, just from looking at his stats, how he's performed the last 2 seasons, I don't think those aren't the striking numbers of a £7 million player. Perhaps you're paying £7 million for the potential that down the line, because he's only 21, he could improve very much. But if I look at the players that we've been linked with in this January window, I think I'd rather go for some of the players that we've been linked with that play in Scotland, because at least there's a known quantity about these players. You know, if you sign Lon Shankland, he's going to score for fun in Scotland. You know, if you sign Bojan Majowski, he's going to score for fun in Scotland, because they've both done that. Shankland for years now, and Majowski since he arrived last summer. So you're thinking, I'd rather go for some of those players where at least you know you're guaranteed goals. There's no risk, because Chris Gardner could come over and completely struggle with the Scottish game. You never know. So I think there's levels for someone like Majowski to go up as well. I think as much as Aberdeen did go out in their Conference League groups, at the end of the day, I thought Majowski was one of their better players. He was actually popping up and scoring goals, and they didn't look out of place when he's played for Macedonia. I think he hasn't really looked out of place either. I remember watching him against England a couple of months ago. He wins a penalty. I thought it was pretty decent on that day. But I'm not too sure how much Aberdeen would be charging for someone like Majowski. I think Hearts want about £7 million for Shankland, and they're trying to work on a new contract for Lon Shankland. So if they can get that sorted, then the fee's only going to go up for Lon Shankland. I think Majowski, they would be demanding around the same as well. So Celtic, if they are going to go for a striker, the one thing that we know is that it's going to cost a lot of money. And I think, do you pay £7 million for a backup player? Are they going to be content with being a backup player to Kyogo? And on the flip side, is Kyogo going to be content with being a backup for whoever we bring in? I don't think so. You've got to keep balance to a squad. You can't just load a squad with quality in every single position, even the backups, because someone's going to be unhappy. You can't keep the entire squad happy. And in a title race, you need team morale to be at a high. So if you're going to go for a striker, I'd like it to be a Majowski or a Shankland. But as I mentioned, I don't think it's a number one priority for me.
No, you have mentioned that. I would like to see us bringing in a forward that's on my shopping list. Whether or not we get it, I don't know. It was as recent as 2 days ago, there was a report on Kvitsgarden and Celtic had open talks apparently with Bromby about the 21-year-old. As you say there, you're buying a lot of that on potential. James, you absolutely are. What we did with Eduard before is we tried before we bought him. Whether or not their club's up for it, I don't know. The loan fee could sway that. But there's a player there, and Kvitsgarden, Danish. When was the last time we signed a Danish striker, James?
Morten Rasmussen.
Oh, there he is. Morten Rasmussen. Oh my word. I'll tell you something, right? There was a great feature in the Not the View back in the day, The Embarrassed the Hoops, right? And I'm just saying it, I'm a fan, I'm allowed to say it, right? It's unfair. He's a better footballer than me. I know all of these things. But I seen Morten Rasmussen, and there was one particular occasion where we played a game against Partick Thistle, right? And it was a friendly. And there was a couple of things happening that day. So Emilio Izaguirre was coming back from a leg break. And this was the first game he was playing back. It was at Firhill. Place was mobbed. Green Brigade were there. Ran out of pies. That type of day. Sunny. We just signed Wanyama. And Wanyama was in the dugout with a tracksuit on. He was the new sign. There was a lot happening that day. It was one of the ones, James, where you could just walk up and pay at the turnstiles, I think. The place was mobbed. It was great. And Rasmussen played centre forward for Celtic. And I'm not being funny. He was worse than Tony Cascarino. That's how bad he was. and I watched most of Cascarino's games. He was murder, absolutely honking.
He scored the last
as a
minute winner
centre-forward.
against someone, you know. The only reason, because I was a bit too young to be remembering and watching every single Celtic game at that time, but a last minute goal always stands out. Who did he score the last
Is it
minute goal?
Hamilton? I'm going to throw in Hamilton away.
I had Kilmarnock in my head, but it might have been Hamilton.
I tried to airbrush Rasmussen out my head. That's maybe why I can't remember. But Kritzgarden can't be any worse than Morton, but I don't know if it's worth paying £7 million for. We'll need to wait and see. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. It's been a really enjoyable show, welcoming young James back to the fold. Please subscribe to the channel. We've got some big content coming up. It's all going to be free. It'll be thrown onto the YouTube channel. In actual fact, I interviewed Johan Malby backstage as well. So there's a part 2 to this, whereby we've got a wee sit down.
If everybody watching, press the notification bell next to the subscribe button as well, because we're going to have so much new content coming out on the channel as well that the schedule might be switched up a bit. So if you want to be the first to see these videos when they come out, press the notification bell. You'll get a notification on your phone. Whenever we go live, whenever we post anything, you'll have all that there.
Brilliant. Absolutely. You're right, James. There's loads happening step by step, as I was explaining to James before we went live, but it's all going to be in place very, very soon. Second part of the Mialbe is me and him just sitting backstage. He's got a wee pint of lager and we're having a chat about Barcelona and how we set up for that game. And we spoke about his memories of that. It was phenomenal. It really was. So look forward to sharing that with you on the YouTube. We're going out and about. We're going to be on the road, Acsom. Most of our gigs have been in the Glasgow area, but we really are getting out and about. And we're going to be visiting places like Inverness and Oban and you know, further afield. Loads and loads happening. So please stick with us, subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up. And thank you, every single one of you, for supporting what we do. All that's left for me to say today on this Monday afternoon is thank you to James Mackenzie for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.